Good morning, Philippines, and to the rest of the world. I'm Ivan Del Rosario, and you are watching Philosophy Time.
We'll undergo in quest and satisfy our curiosity in search for wisdom. I'm Sofia Angela May Santos.
A big part of living is spent pondering many questions, and our lives become more meaningful because we search for answers to these innumerable questions. What is the nature and the etymological meaning of philosophy? Roll VTR.
What is philosophy? Philosophy essentially is a study for wisdom. So what does that mean? What is wisdom? Well, as many philosophers have said in the past, it is the beginning of wisdom to say, I don't know. Wisdom is essentially uncertainty. How is wisdom different to knowledge? As history has illustrated, knowledge is something that can be passed on from generation to generation via books, scribes, notes, and teachings. Knowledge has the power to therefore evolve. Whereas wisdom hasn't really evolved from the days of the first philosophers. Wisdom tends to be something that can be mentored to individuals and contained within an individual's life. Therefore, it cannot evolve any higher. In fact, wisdom from ancient philosophers has not really changed in thousands of years. So why compare knowledge and wisdom? Well, essentially, knowledge talks and wisdom listens. So what do philosophers do? Philosophers chase wisdom. And as a result, over the centuries, they have developed the knowledge on specific things that make people unwise. Being wise is attempting to live and die well. Being wise is the freedom to ask if an idea is logical rather than simply agreeing with popular opinion that the idea is right. Being wise is the ability to feel the rain during a thunderstorm, rather than getting simply wet. As the famous French-German philosopher Albert Schweitzer said, constant kindness can accomplish much. As the sun makes ice melt, kindness causes misunderstanding, mistrust, and hostility to evaporate. Philosophy is the realization that wisdom comes from truth and truth comes from reality. Green elation will make you think and respect the art of philosophy.
To give us more details, here is Lourdes Guadlao, reporting live from Becuran High School. Lourdes?
We are live here at the Becuran High School in search for the answer to the question, what is the nature and etymological meaning of philosophy? A philosophy teacher in senior high school named Sir Angelito Pineda was interviewed on what is the nature and etymological meaning of philosophy.
The etymological meaning of philosophy is from the two words philos and sophia, which means love of wisdom. Yun lang ba? Nature of philosophy. Okay, so since philosophy is a search for meaning, so which is unending questions or search for meaning. So it is more than science. Kasi in science, di ba, yung we are searching for the answer. But in philosophy, even though that the answer is already there, so there's this what we call endless questions. And through those questions, so nagbe-benefit yung science and even yung technology because through inventions, so bakit nagkakaroon ng inventions? Seriously, because of unending questions. And bakit nagkaroon ng endless questions? It is because man is searching for knowledge and wisdom. Okay, so isa yun sa mga nature ng philosophy because man is not content. There's no contentment on the part of man. So the endless yung endless question meaning endless searching for knowledge.
This has been Lourdes Banlao reporting for Philosophy Time.
Thank you, Lourdes. Now for the second headline. Since ancient times, philosophers have been pondering some of the most enduring questions about the human existence. Who are the fathers of ancient and modern philosophy? Roll VTR.
René Descartes was a French 17th century philosopher, famous above all for saying, "I think, therefore I am," but worthy of our attention for many reasons beyond this. What makes him stand out is that he was a fierce rationalist. In an age when many philosophers still backed up their arguments with appeals to God, Descartes trusted in nothing more than the human power of logic. This is how he defiantly kicked off his book, Rules for the Direction of the Mind. "I shall bring to light the true riches of our souls, opening up to each of us the means whereby we can find, within ourselves, without any help from anyone else, all the knowledge that we may need for the conduct of life." Descartes had immense faith in what introspection, guided by definition, sound argument, and clarity of thought, could achieve. He believed that much of what was wrong with the world was caused by misusing our minds, by confusion, bad definition, and unconscious illogicality. His life was an attempt to make our minds better equipped for the task of thinking. To solve key questions, Descartes proposed that one always had to divide large problems into small, understandable sections by way of incisive questions. This is what he called his method of doubts. We get muddled by certain questions like, what's the meaning of life or what is love? Because we're not careful enough about how we break these big inquiries down. He described the method of doubts as akin to having a large barrel of apples, where good ones are mixed with bad ones. To be a philosopher means a commitment to sorting out the entire barrel, to inspecting each apple individually and throwing away all the bad ones to ensure only those of the best quality are left. Another way to think about Descartes, and this explains why he would, among other things, turn out to be such a hero to the leaders of the French Revolution, is that he believed in grounding all of our ideas in individual experience and reason, rather than authority and tradition. In his greatest book, Discourse on the Method, published in 1637, he explained how he had come to write it. "A long time ago, I entirely abandoned the study of letters, resolving to seek no knowledge other than that which could be found in myself, or else in the great book of the world. I spent my youth travelling, visiting courts and armies, mixing with people of diverse temperaments and ranks, gathering various experiences, testing myself in situations which fortune afforded me, and at all times reflecting personally upon whatever came my way, so as to derive some profit from it." Descartes spent a large part of his adult life away from his native France in the Dutch Republic, since he held the belief, not entirely unwisely, that the mercantile Dutch would, as a people, be far too concerned with earning money to pester a free-thinking man like himself. However, it turned out that the Dutch were a little less materialistic than he'd hoped, and the philosopher ended up moving 24 times to keep ahead of spies and government agents. Descartes' subjective approach to philosophy reached its climax when he arrived at the famous phrase, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. The phrase first appeared in French, je pense, donc je suis, in the Discourse on the Method, before then appearing in Latin in The Principles of Philosophy of 1644. It was intended to be Descartes' ultimate answer to a question that philosophers sometimes get perhaps unreasonably interested in, namely, how can one know that anything, including oneself, actually exists rather than being some sort of dream or phantasm? On his quest for certainty around this question of whether it might all be a dream, Descartes began by observing that our human senses are deeply unreliable. He couldn't, for example, he said, be trusted to know whether he was actually sitting in a room in his dressing gown next to a fire, or merely dreaming of such a thing. But there was one thing he could know for sure. He could trust that he was actually thinking. His existence could be proved by a neat tautological trick. He could not be thinking and wondering if he existed if he did not exist. Therefore, his thinking was a very basic proof of his being, or, to return to the maxim, I think, therefore I am. This might not sound like a huge insight, but Descartes used it as an Archimedean point in an epistemologically unsteady world. With this certainty safely banked, Descartes argued that his mind could go on to discover other similarly irrefutable truths. Some of the charm of Descartes' work comes from his entwining of personal details along with more arid philosophical passages. He tells us, for example, that his revolutionary idea came to him during the winter of 1619, when he'd escaped the fierce cold of the Low Countries by hopping into a stove and spending the whole day meditating inside. Descartes epitomizes the solitary end of philosophy. One can, in his eyes, solve the most profound problems by searching deep within oneself. Teams of individuals or ideas passed through the generations, as they are in universities, are deeply suspect for Descartes. Philosophers don't need gangs of scientists using expensive equipment, unheard-of terminology, and huge data sets. They just need a quiet room and a rational mind. At another point, Descartes recounts that he mocked friends of his who once showed up at his home at 11 in the morning and were surprised to find him still in bed. "What are you doing?" they inquired skeptically. "Thinking," Descartes replied. The group was stunned, but Descartes criticized them in turn for privileging often nonsensical practical tasks over the beauty of pure, quiet reflection in bed. In 1649, Descartes finished another great work, Passions of the Soul. It was the outcome of 6 years of correspondence with a royal acquaintance, the Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, who was a keen amateur philosopher and a rather emotional and turbulent soul. She had written to Descartes begging him to write about passions, in order that she might get to know and control her own more clearly. Descartes obliged, thinking that the ancient philosophers had done a poor job of analysing the passions, and that ordinary and not so ordinary people would benefit immensely from another look at the topic. He therefore opened the Passions of the Soul with a characteristic claim: "I shall be obliged to write just as if I were considering a topic that no one had dealt with before me." The work provides a beautiful taxonomy of pretty much any passion one might feel, as well as descriptions of their causes, effects, and functions. This is followed by another section called The Discipline of Virtue, a manual of advice on how we can control our passions and enjoy a virtuous life. Descartes identified 6 fundamental passions: wonder, love, hatred, desire, joy, and sadness. From these, there followed in his eyes an unlimited number of specific passions, combinations of the original ones. Descartes didn't believe in vanquishing passions, as the ancient Stoic philosophers had proposed, merely in learning how to identify them in oneself and understand their impact on one's behavior. He would have been very sympathetic to psychotherapy. He believed that a key task of being a philosopher was to help people understand and therefore control their passions, that is, become a little less anxious, status-driven, scared, or inclined to fall head over heels in love with inappropriate people. He was optimistic about how much progress we could make psychologically. Even those who have the weakest souls can acquire absolute mastery over their passions if they work hard enough at training and guiding them. Descartes' psychological and philosophical work attracted ever more powerful admirers. In 1646, Queen Christina of Sweden got interested in sorting out issues in her mind and began a correspondence with Descartes. She even persuaded the philosopher to move to Sweden to tutor her in passion and philosophy in 1649. However, the early working hours required, the Queen could only make time for lessons at 5 a.m., and the harsh cold soon made Descartes ill. He died of pneumonia in 1650 at the age of 53. To remember Descartes by "I think therefore I am" is perhaps not as shallow as one might initially have presumed. The sentence does truly capture something important about him and the task of philosophy in general. It signals a commitment to working through emotional confusion, prejudice, and unhelpful tradition in order to arrive at an independent, rational.
Aristotle was born around 384 BC in the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedonia, where his father was the royal doctor. He grew up to be arguably the most influential philosopher ever, with modest nicknames like the Master and simply the Philosopher. His first big job was tutoring Alexander the Great, who soon after went out and conquered the known world. Aristotle then headed off to Athens, worked with Plato for a bit, then branched out on his own. He founded a little school called the Lyceum. French secondary schools, the lycées, are named in honour of this venture. He liked to walk about while teaching and discussing ideas. His followers were nicknamed Peripatetics, the Wanderers. His many books are actually lecture notes. Aristotle was fascinated by how many things actually work. How does a chick grow in an egg? How do squid reproduce? Why does a plant grow well in one place and hardly at all in another? And, most importantly, what makes a human life and a whole society go well? For Aristotle, philosophy was about practical wisdom. Here are 4 big philosophical questions he answered. 1. What makes people happy? In the Nicomachean Ethics, the book got its name because it was edited by his son Nicomachus, Aristotle set himself the task of identifying the factors that lead people to have a good life, or not. He suggested that good and successful people all possess distinct virtues, and proposed that we should get better at identifying what these are, so that we can nurture them in ourselves and honour them in others. Aristotle zeroed in on 11 virtues: courage, temperance, liberality, magnificence, magnanimity, pride, patience, truthfulness, wittiness, friendliness, modesty. Aristotle also observed that every virtue seems to be bang in the middle of 2 vices. It occupies what he termed the golden mean between 2 extremes of character. For example, in Book 4 of his Ethics, under the charming title of Conversational Virtues, Wit, Buffoonery, and Boorishness, Aristotle looks at ways people are better or worse at conversation. Knowing how to have a good conversation is one of the key ingredients of the good life, Aristotle recognized. Some people go wrong because they lack a subtle sense of humour. That's the bore, someone useless for any kind of social intercourse because he contributes nothing and takes offence at everything. But others carry humour to excess. The buffoon cannot resist a joke, sparing neither himself nor anybody else, provided that he can raise a laugh, and saying things that a man of taste would never dream of saying. So, the virtuous person is in the golden mean in this area, witty but tactful. A particularly fascinating moment is when Aristotle draws up a table of too little, too much, and just right around the whole host of virtues. We can't change our behaviour in any of these areas just at the drop of a hat, but change is possible, eventually. Moral goodness, says Aristotle, is the result of habit. It takes time, practice, encouragement. So Aristotle thinks people who lack virtue should be understood as unfortunate rather than wicked. What they need isn't scolding or being thrown into prison, but better teachers and more guidance. 2. What's art for? The blockbuster art at the time was tragedy. Athenians watched gory plays at community festivals in huge open-air theatres. Aeschylus, Euripides and Sophocles were household names. Aristotle wrote a how-to-write great plays manual, the Poetics. It's packed with great tips. For example, make sure to use peripeteia, a change in fortune, when for the hero things go from great to awful. In Titanic, Leonardo DiCaprio gets Kate Winslet, great, then they hit the iceberg, awful. And anagnoresis, a moment of dramatic revelation when suddenly the hero works out their life is a catastrophe. But what is tragedy actually for? What's the point of a whole community coming together to watch horrible things happening to lead characters, like Oedipus in the play by Sophocles, who by accident kills his father, gets married to his mother, finds out he's done these things, and gouges out his own eyes in remorse and despair? Aristotle's answer is catharsis, which is Greek for catharsis. Catharsis is a kind of cleaning. You get rid of bad stuff, in this case cleaning up our emotions, specifically our confusions around the feelings of fear and pity. We've got natural problems here. We're hard-hearted. We don't give pity where it's deserved. And we're prone to either exaggerated fears or not getting frightened enough. Tragedy reminds us that terrible things can befall decent people, including ourselves. A small flaw can lead to a whole life unravelling. And so we should have more compassion or pity for those whose actions go disastrously wrong. We need to be collectively retaught these crucial truths on a regular basis. The task of art, as Aristotle saw it, is to make profound truths about life stick in our minds. 3. What are friends for? In books 8 and 9 of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle identifies 3 different kinds of friendship. There's friendship that comes about when each person is seeking fun. Their chief interest is in their own pleasure and the opportunity of the moment, which the other person provides. Then there are friendships that are really strategic acquaintances. They take pleasure in each other's company only insofar as they have hopes of advantage of it. Then there's the true friend. Not someone who's just like you, but someone who isn't you, but about whom you care as much as you care about yourself. The sorrows of a true friend are your sorrows. Their joys are yours. It makes you more vulnerable, should anything befall this person, but it's hugely strengthening too. You're relieved from the too small orbit of your own thoughts and worries. You expand into the life of another. Together you become larger, cleverer, more resilient, more fair-minded. You share virtues and cancel out each other's defects. Friendship teaches us what we ought to be. It's quite literally the best part of life. 4. How can ideas cut through in a busy world? Like a lot of people, Aristotle was struck by the fact that the best argument doesn't always win the debate or the battle. He wanted to know why this happens and what we can do about it. He had lots of opportunity for observations. In Athens, lots of decisions were made in public meetings, often in the agora, the town square. Orators would vie with one another to sway popular opinion. Aristotle plotted the ways audiences and individuals are influenced by many factors that don't strictly engage with logic or the facts of the case. It's maddening, and many serious people, especially Plato, can't stand it. They avoid the marketplace and populist debate. Aristotle was more ambitious. He invented the art of what we still today call rhetoric, the art of getting people to agree with you. He wanted thoughtful, serious, and well-intentioned people to learn how to be persuasive, to reach those who don't agree already. He makes some timeless points. You have to recognize, acknowledge, and soothe people's fears. You have to see the emotional side of the issue. Is someone's pride on the line? Are they feeling embarrassed? And edge around it accordingly. You have to make it funny because attention spans are short. And you might have to use illustrations and examples to make your point come alive. We're keen students of Aristotle. Today, philosophy doesn't sound like the most practical activity. Maybe that's because we've not paid enough attention recently to Aristotle.
To give us more details, here's Joan Guevara reporting live from Beccaran High School. Joan?
We are live here at Beccaran High School in search for the answer to the question, who are the fathers of the modern and ancient philosophy? A teacher in Beccaran High School named Sir Nico Garcia was interviewed on who are the fathers of ancient and modern philosophy.
Empedocles, Parmenides, even Pythagoras. Pythagoras was a mathematician, but he is also a renowned philosopher. But in ancient philosophy, we have three great philosophers. We have Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. One, pwede may Tagalog? Yung tatlong yun, parang they succeed each other. First of all, Socrates. Socrates is considered to be the father of Western philosophy, isn't it? Socrates was also regarded as the wisest man ever because he knows that he knows nothing. Alam niya na wala siyang alam. Bakit? Kasi whenever he comes close with a people, for example, a carpenter, he will ask a carpenter, what is this? What is that? When his questions were answered, dun niya malalaman na marami pala talaga siyang hindi pa alam. Dahil sa pag-admit niya na wala siyang alam, siya ay naging wise, naging matalino. So, next, Plato. Si Plato, he was the student of Socrates. Pero si Plato naging conceited. Parang inisip niya na mas matalino siya sa teacher niya. Then came Aristotle. So, Aristotle was the student of Plato. So, kung yung ginawa ni Plato kay Socrates, bumalik din kay Plato, ginawa rin yun ni Aristotle. So, all of them, they have contributed a lot in terms of philosophy. When we say philosophy, from the Greek word philo, which means love, and sophia, meaning wisdom. So, the love for wisdom. So, if we will talk about philosophy, kailangan nating i-differentiate yung knowledge and wisdom. So, what are the difference of the two? Let us relate it into the parable of the tomato. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, isn't it? Prutas ang kamatis. But wisdom is not putting the tomato in the fruit salad kahit na alam mo na yun ay prutas. Yun ang wisdom. Yun ang binigay sa atin ng tatlo. In modern philosophy, isa lang yung pinakamatunog na pangalan dyan. It's René Descartes. René Descartes, he is famous for his line, in cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore, I am. Di ba? Even though he was a mathematician, he was able to impart some of his knowledge for the love of learning and the love of wisdom. Thank you.
This has been Joanne Guevara reporting for Philosophy Time.
Thank you, Joanne. And now for the third headline. People tend to apply an analytical perspective when looking at problems or situations. It is either holistic or partial. What is the difference between these two? Roll VTR.
Well, my love and my call to this field came from a belief that what we needed in health and healthcare was a holistic perspective. And so my work really for 15 plus years has been in the role of originally holistic and now integrative healthcare. And I really have used that interest and that need to drive my interest in health coaching. There are a number of challenges. The first is anytime we try to change a conventional system, our natural human instinct is to kind of protect our terrain and our turf and our expertise, and people have decades of training in, and all of a sudden they're like, now I'm supposed to do something different. That's very scary. But I think if you can bring the perspective back to people of this isn't necessarily changing what you do, but it may be changing the way in which you do it. That's a holistic perspective. And I find that much less threatening to people practicing in conventional circles than the idea that they're going to have to acquire a whole new set of tools and skills and knowledge base. And I have dear friends and colleagues who are holistic providers from every walk of professional practice, whether they're a practicing surgeon or they're an acupuncturist. I also have people in all of those worlds that may even be doing integrative or complementary practices that aren't necessarily very holistic in their perspective. They don't necessarily consider the mind, the body, the spirit, the relational, the environmental, the social, all of those aspects. So it doesn't really matter if your tool is a scalpel or an acupuncture needle. It's really the lens through which you look at and relate to the person that you're interacting with. And I really think that all healthcare professions have within them the capability of doing that. And more importantly, I think that...
To give us more details, here is Michelle Dison reporting live from Beckeran High School. Michelle?
We are live here at the Beckeran High School in search for the answer to what is the difference between the holistic and partial perspective.
In BHS, named Sir Royder Cuevas was interviewed on what is the difference between holistic and partial perspective.
Based on man. Pagdating. Holistic means yung the total, the whole personality of a person. It maybe includes his emotion, his entire life, everything about man. Partial, there are some aspects of a person that we're not going to tackle, we're not going to talk about. It may include those who are in the lighter part of a person, like for example, purely emotions, something like that. His economic status, something like that, or maybe it can be a certain aspect of a person that has something to do with his or her character. That's all.
This has been Michelle Dizon reporting for Philosophy Time.
Thank you, Michelle. More knowledge will be given after this break.
Philosophy starts in doubt and confusion about something that we want to find an answer or solution about it, that we undergo a lot of quests to satisfy our curiosity, and philosophy is continuous searching.
Philosophy serves as a guide or reference material in making decisions in our lives, and it reflects on who we are as a person.
We use philosophy in our daily lives, and because of philosophy, we start doubting and searching for answers.
Philosophy is important because it involves our willingness to search for the answers in our curiosities.
To appreciate philosophy, we need to realize that everything we do in our lives is philosophy. back to Philosophy Time for our fourth headlines. Seemingly simple or mundane actions take a whole new meaning when one engaged in reflection. What is the relationship of reflection as an aspect of philosophy? To give us more details, here is Joan Guevara reporting live from Bacuran High School. Joan?
We are live here at Bacuran High School in search for the answer to the question, what is the relationship of reflection as an aspect of philosophy? A teacher in senior high school named Ma'am Yvonne Tolentino was interviewed on what is the relationship of reflection as an aspect of philosophy.
As an aspect of philosophy, is that your question? I think philosophy would not have started if there was no reflection on the part of man. I think man's search for knowledge started during the time that he's not busy, that he has enough time on his hands to think about what is happening around him. Think about what is happening in the world, what is happening to the earth, why day turns into night, night turns into day, why there is rain, why people behave like this and like that, which, as we all know, they all have their origins in philosophy. These sciences about sciences of geology, sciences of psychology, anything, even I think laws, they all started with philosophy. So I think reflection is the big part of philosophy, the big aspect of philosophy. Okay.
This has been Joan Guevara reporting for Philosophy Time.
There you have it. This has been Ivan Del Rosario
And Sofia Jalamin Santos for Philosophy Time.
where you'll undergo in quest and satisfy your curiosity in search for wisdom.
Ready to serve you anytime, anywhere.
Good day, everyone!